The noblest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard, read, or seen, but to be experienced. Soren Kierkegaard. Modern humans know a great deal, but feel very little. We read hundreds of quotes about happiness, yet we rarely live a single day in true peace. We watch countless stories of love, yet still do not understand the sensation of a heart fluttering when held in a sincere embrace. We hear others speak of freedom, loss, maturity, or loneliness as familiar concepts, but until we walk through them ourselves, all knowledge remains a faint shadow of the truth. There are things in life that language is powerless to capture. No book can fully convey the feeling of a new parent hearing their child's first cry. No description is sufficient to explain the shattering sensation of losing someone who was once your entire world. And no one truly understands the value of peace until they have weathered the storms within their own soul. Experience is what transforms knowledge into the very flesh and blood of the soul. Humans often live on borrowed knowledge. They know what is right through books, social media, or the advice of others. Yet those truths have never been internalized. One can speak eloquently about courage, but collapse at the face of their first failure. One can lecture on love, but never truly sacrifice for anyone. For there are truths that are understood by emotion, not by memory. Experience holds a special power because it touches the entirety of your being. It does not merely pass through the ears or eyes. It travels through the heart, the nerves, the memory, and the deepest corners of the soul. A lesson walked through personally always leaves a deeper mark than 1,000 stories heard from others. Just as no one learns to swim by standing on the shore reading theory, one cannot understand life by observing it from a safe distance. The most beautiful aspect of experience is how it grants a person depth. One who has known poverty will understand the value of sufficiency. One who has been lonely will know how to cherish the presence of others. One who has stumbled will understand compassion for those still struggling to find their way. Experiences, whether painful or beautiful, silently expand a person's inner world. A sunset viewed through a screen is merely an image. But when you truly stand before the ocean, hear the waves, feel the wind on your skin, and watch the sun sink below the horizon, that moment becomes a part of your soul. Life is always like that. It does not wish to be studied from afar. It wants to be touched, lived with, and felt with the full presence of a human being. And perhaps that is why the most mature people often do not say much about life. They do not try to prove they understand everything, for they know the deepest things cannot be fully expressed in words. They can only be felt through loving with all one's heart, experiencing true loss, suffering profound pain, and being reborn after it all. Life is not a book to be merely read, nor a painting to be merely gazed upon. It is a journey one must step into personally, and the most beautiful things in a human life will not lie in what you have been told, but in what your heart has truly endured. Self-care is how you take your power back. Lalah Delia. There are stages in life where we live like a machine that has lost its steering wheel. We wake up not because of passion, but because of responsibility. We smile not because of happiness, but because we fear others will notice the cracks spreading through our soul. Many call this maturity, but deeper down, it is the state of a person silently losing control over their own life. And the greatest tragedy lies not in the exhaustion itself, but in the fact that we become so accustomed to it that we believe pain is normal. Self-care is not the selfish indulgence many mistake it for. It is the act of one who begins to realize that their soul needs healing just as the body needs air to breathe. A tree cannot provide shade if its roots are withered. A human being cannot love, contribute, or be strong if inside they are only the ashes of burnout. People often destroy themselves in very polite ways. We remain silent when we need to cry. We keep pushing when our minds have hit the red alert. We give others our time, energy, and tenderness, yet treat ourselves like a land to be exploited until it runs dry. This is why many appear successful on the outside, but are hollow inside. Like a house with the lights on, but no one home. It is the moment you dare to stop amidst the chaotic grind to listen to your own breath. It is when you understand that resting is not weakness, but wisdom. It is when you reject the things that tear your soul apart, even if you once accepted them just to be loved. A cup of tea on a quiet evening, a deep enough sleep, saying no without feeling guilt. Those small things are actually how humans mend the invisible cracks in their inner selves. One who practices self-care is not running away from life, but is clear-headed enough not to lose themselves in it. They understand that peace does not appear by chance. It is built from silent choices made every day. And then comes a point where they realize true strength lies not in how much pain one can endure, but in the ability to save one's own soul before the darkness swallows everything. When a person begins to learn how to love themselves, the world within them changes. They no longer live like a leaf swept away by the wind, but like a ship that has finally found its helm amidst the great storm of life. A healthy feeling of inferiority comes not from comparing oneself to others, but from comparing oneself to one's own ideal. Ichiro Kishimi. It is exhausting to always look at others to measure your own value. We scroll past one person's success, another's beauty, and someone else's seemingly perfect life, then quietly place ourselves on the scale. The more we weigh and measure, the easier it is to lose our inner peace. For comparing yourself to others is like running on an endless treadmill. You never truly arrive. You only get more exhausted. Healthy self-esteem is not built on the admiring gazes of the crowd. It is erected from the private dialogue between you and yourself. It emerges when you look back at the person you were yesterday and realize you have grown a little more today. A truly strong person does not need to conquer the world to feel valuable. They only need to conquer their own procrastination, fear, and internal limits. Comparison is not just about feeling inferior, it's that it makes us forget our own identity. An eagle would be useless if it spent its life suffering because it could not swim like a fish. A rose cannot bloom beautifully if it spends every day trying to turn into a sunflower. Each human being carries a different pace of growth, a different season to bloom, and a unique journey that no one can copy. Your ideal version is not a perfect model set by society. It is the person you want to become when you are no longer driven by fear, insecurity, or the need for validation. It could be a person who is calmer, kinder, more disciplined, or stronger. And the most beautiful journey in life is getting closer to that version every day. Stop living to surpass others, and you will begin to truly live. You will no longer be envious of another's light, for you understand that you also have your own fire to nurture. A healthy tree does not grow by looking at the height of the forest. It grows by sinking its roots deeper into the earth. The same is true for humans. Sustainable confidence does not come from being better than someone else. It comes from the feeling that today you have not betrayed your own potential. And then, one day, the most profound success is not being the most prominent in the eyes of the world, but becoming the person who makes you feel proud when you look in the mirror. The best way to know if you are on the right path? Stop looking at the path. Marcus Buckingham. The more we fear going the wrong way, the easier it is to get lost. We constantly look down to check every footstep, scrutinize every decision, and worry about whether we are heading in the right direction. But when the mind is obsessed with the path, it forgets the reason why it began the journey. A climber who only fixates on their feet will never see the vast sky ahead. And sometimes it is excessive doubt that causes a person to lose their way more than any mistake could. The right direction does not always bring a sense of certainty. There are paths that are very lonely, very slow, and even full of skepticism. But what confirms the value of a journey is not whether it is smooth or recognized by many, but whether it makes your soul more authentic. A right path usually doesn't make you stand out immediately. It makes you deeper day by day. Do not measure life by speed, but by inner resonance. They understand that if they wake up each morning and the heart still wants to try, if each failure helps them understand themselves better rather than hate themselves more, then that is already a sign of a worthwhile direction. For the true purpose of life is not to arrive the fastest, but to become the most worthy version of yourself along the way. There is a truth that many only realize after many years. The happiest people are rarely those who are always certain they are right. They simply believe in what brings their soul peace. A bird does not fly by constantly looking down into the abyss to check its altitude. It flies by the instinct of trusting its wings. Humans are the same. When you are too busy checking if you are on the right path, you lose your spontaneity, your courage, and the joy of being alive. Sometimes the answer is not on the map, but in the state of mind of the one walking. If the path makes you gradually kinder, stronger, freer, and more honest, then no matter how winding it is still the right path. For the truest direction in life is not the one that leads you to where others admire, but to where you no longer have to betray yourself to exist. Most of the choices we make each day may feel like the products of well-considered decision-making, but they're not. They're habits. Charles Duhigg. Humans often pride themselves on living by logic, believing that every decision stems from careful thought and personal will. In reality, a large part of our lives is operated not by awareness, but by inertia. We wake up with the same patterns of thought, react with the same emotions, love with the same models, and fail in the same familiar cycles. The scariest part is that many call this personality, when in fact, it is just habits that have existed so long they wear the face of the self. A person who always procrastinates often thinks they lack motivation. A person who easily loses their temper believes they are just blunt. A person who repeatedly chooses the wrong partner in love believes fate is unfair. But deep down, all are being controlled by psychological ruts repeated thousands of times. The human brain loves familiarity more than it loves correctness. It would rather stay in a familiar cage than step into a field of freedom that is uncertain. Because of this, many people don't truly live. They just reenact themselves every day under different circumstances. Habit is like water silently eroding stone. A small action that seems harmless, when repeated long enough, becomes destiny. No one becomes confident overnight, nor does anyone lose themselves in a single moment. Humans are built by the things they do repeatedly. The way you talk to yourself every morning, how you react to failure, how you treat your body, your time, and your pain, all are silently building your future self. It is easy to notice a storm, but rare is the person who realizes they are slowly sinking in a slow-moving current. There are people who live for decades in the same pattern of negative thinking without ever asking, Is this truly who I am? They imagine they are making choices, but they are actually just reacting to old mental programming. If life is largely made of habits, then changing fate doesn't necessarily start with grand revolutions. Sometimes it starts with a very small change that is repeated long enough. A positive thought held for a few extra seconds, remaining silent instead of getting angry, waking up a little earlier one morning, a decision not to give up. Those small things are like adjusting the rudder of a ship. Initially, you see almost no difference, but after years, it will lead you to a completely different land. A human life is not the sum of rare, grand decisions, but the product of the things done repeatedly in silence to change your life. First, change the things you thought were the most trivial. Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels this primary thought. If I look perfect and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. Brené Brown. Perfectionism is often mistaken for a sign of excellence. We see a disciplined, meticulous person who always sets high standards, and we think that is strength. But deep beneath that polished shell, there is often not confidence, but fear. Fear of being criticized, fear of being looked down upon, fear of failure, and most sadly, the fear that one is not worthy if they are not perfect. Perfectionism is not truly born from a desire to excel, but from an obsession with being accepted. The perfectionist believes that as long as they make no mistakes, show no weakness, and disappoint no one, they will avoid pain. But life has never worked that way. The more one tries to control everything to be beyond reproach, the more they live in stress and exhaustion. For perfection is like the horizon. The closer you get, the further it recedes. There is never a moment perfect enough for a perfectionist to feel truly safe. A person working to the point of exhaustion is called hardworking. One who always pushes their limits is seen as having strong will. One who never allows themselves to be weak is praised as being strong. But few see the silent war within them, the feeling that they are only worthy of love when achieving results, and that self-worth must be proven continuously, like a debt that can never be fully repaid. Perfectionism is the illusion that if everything is good enough, they will not be hurt. But the paradox is that the harder one tries to be perfect to avoid shame, the more one lives in shame. Even a tiny mistake is enough to make them torment themselves for days. They do not see failure as an experience, but as evidence that they are not good enough. And so, they live like an actor who can never leave the stage, constantly tense, keeping the mask from falling. A flower is beautiful, not because it is perfect, but because it blooms naturally. Humans are the same. The souls with the most profound attraction are often not those without flaws, but those who dare to live authentically with their flaws. Healing begins when a person understands that their value does not lie in how right they do everything, but in the fact that they are still worthy of love even when they are imperfect. Learn to stop fighting your own imperfection, for in the end, what connects us is not a cold perfection, but those very human cracks where the light of empathy can shine through. To share your weakness is to make yourself vulnerable. To make yourself vulnerable is to show your strength. Criss Jami. Most people grow up with an invisible belief that being strong means not being allowed to be weak. We learn to hide our tears, swallow our hurts, and build up okay versions of ourselves to step out into the world. Everyone tries to become a solid fortress, to the point of forgetting that what connects humans has never been the walls, but the cracks. For only where there is a crack can the light enter. Humans fear vulnerability, not because it is ugly, but because it makes them lose the sense of control. When you admit you are hurt, lonely, disappointed, or insecure, you are stepping out of the psychological armor you have worn for too long, and that is incredibly difficult. Many people would rather live in solitude than let anyone see their most fragile parts. They imagine hiding is safety, but in reality, it is a kind of survival that slowly suffocates the soul. Vulnerability is often misunderstood as weakness, when in fact, it requires immense courage. One can shout to cover up fear, but it takes true strength to say, "I am in pain." One can pretend to be perfect before the crowd, but it takes profound inner strength to admit they are not okay. That is not the collapse of character. It is the moment a person stops running from themselves. Those who always try to appear invulnerable are often those carrying the most unhealed trauma. They turn coldness into a shield and distance into a defense. But buried emotions do not disappear. They silently control a person from within. Like a room closed for too long, everything may seem orderly outside, but inside it lacks air to breathe. When people dare to reveal the truth about themselves, they begin to free themselves from the pressure of becoming a perfect model. This is why sincere conversations are often more healing than 100 cliches. When someone tells you about their fear, what moves you is not that they are weak, but that they are real. Authenticity always has a power that no mask can replace. A tree can withstand the storm, not because it is rigid, but because it knows how to bend before the wind. Humans are the same. True strength lies not in never being hurt, but in the ability to face the hurt without losing yourself. The strongest person is not the one without wounds, but the one who dares to look straight at them without shame. Vulnerability does not make you smaller, and in a world where everyone tries to appear strong, the act of daring to live authentically with your imperfect parts is sometimes the rarest and most beautiful form of courage. If I don't poke my head out of my shell and show people who I am, all anyone will ever think I am is my shell. Shonda Rhimes. We often simultaneously crave to be understood and fear being truly seen. We create shells to survive in the world, a calm face when the inside is in chaos, a social smile covering loneliness, a show of strength to hide vulnerability. Over time, that shell doesn't just help us avoid judgment, it becomes the identity the world is familiar with. And tragedy begins when others only know that shell, while the real person inside is slowly forgotten. Many live their whole lives like actors trapped in their own roles. They fear if they reveal their true selves, they won't be loved, won't be recognized, or worse, will be rejected. So, they choose safety. But the price of that safety is a very deep sense of emptiness. For nothing is lonelier than being loved by everyone for a version of you that isn't really you. A compliment given to the mask can sometimes hurt more than silence, because deep down, you know, if they saw the real me, would they still stay? The shell is a defense mechanism. It is created from times of hurt, memories of being criticized, and moments when one felt not good enough. Like a snail retreating into its shell when it senses danger, a human hides their truest part to avoid being hurt. But a creature cannot grow if it lives forever in its narrow, protective layer. What once helped you survive in the past can become what imprisons you in the present. The world cannot understand a person who never dares to appear. If you always hide your emotions, others will think you are cold. If you always pretend to be strong, they will never know you also need to be held. If you always live to please others, they will only love the convenient version you created for them. Humans cannot connect with a mask. They can only connect with what is authentic. Of course, stepping out of the shell is always terrifying. It is like standing in a crowded room without your protective armor. But it is also the first moment of freedom, for when you dare to live authentically, you no longer have to spend energy maintaining a false image. You begin to be loved for yourself, rather than for the role you played so well. A seed cannot become a tree if it remains forever in its hard shell. It must crack open, must be weak in that first moment, so that life can reach up. Humans are the same. Sometimes, maturity begins not by becoming stronger, but by having the courage to stop hiding. And then you will realize the most beautiful thing in life is not making everyone admire your perfect shell, but finding those who can see the real person inside and still choose to stay. Once you start making an effort to awaken yourself, meaning paying more attention to your activities, you suddenly begin to appreciate life much more. Robert Biswas-Diener. Most people don't truly live. They just react by inertia. They wake up but do not feel the morning, eat a meal while their mind is elsewhere, and talk to someone while their heart is pulled away by hundreds of chaotic thoughts. Life thus passes like a fast-forwarded film. Lots of movement, but very little presence. And the sad thing is that humans often only realize how shallowly they have lived when time has gone too far. Awakening is not something mysterious. It is simply the moment you are truly present in your own life. It is when you drink a glass of water and feel the coolness instead of drinking like a machine. It is when you look into the eyes of the person opposite you instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. It is when you notice the sound of the wind, the sunlight, the smell of morning coffee, or your own heartbeat still silently existing around you every day. Those things are always there, but a mind too noisy is usually not quiet enough to see them. Humans suffer much, not necessarily because life is so bad, but because they live too far from the present. The mind constantly pulls them back to old regrets or pushes them into worries not yet happened. They carry the past on their shoulders and place the future on their chests. Until the present, the only place life truly exists is smothered. A person not paying attention to life is like standing in the rain but never feeling the water touch their skin. They don't necessarily have an easier life, but they have the ability to feel more deeply. And it is that feeling that changes the quality of existence. A simple meal can become enough. A quiet afternoon can bring peace. A sincere conversation can heal the entire weary day. Things previously considered ordinary suddenly become gifts, not because the world changed, but because the way we are present in the world has changed. The more one pays attention to the present, the less they are controlled by life. They begin to recognize an emotion before it turns into an impulse, recognize sadness before it turns into despair, and recognize precious things before losing them. Awakening is like turning on a light in a dark room. The objects are still there, but for the first time, you truly see them clearly. A falling leaf can also become a poetic moment for one who knows to stop and observe. An ordinary day can also be full of meaning for one who knows how to be present. Life has never been as poor as we think. It's just that the mind is too busy, making us walk past its beauty without realizing. Cherishing life does not come from possessing more, but from feeling more deeply. Pull the soul back to the unfolding moment where life, in its truest way, is still silently blooming every second. Our wounds are often the doors that open to the best and most beautiful parts of ourselves. David Richo. Humans often see hurt as something to be hidden. They try to walk as if they've never been in pain, smile as if they've never been shattered, and be strong as if they've never had a sleepless night of despair. The very places that were once most broken are often where the light enters deepest. A heart never hurt may be whole, but it may not be deep. A soul that has walked through loss often carries within it a capacity for empathy that books cannot teach. Psychological wounds are like silent cuts on a tree trunk. Initially, they cause us pain, making us think we are being destroyed. But over time, it is around those cuts that the tree learns to create tougher wood to continue growing. Humans are the same. There are pains that initially seem only to destroy, but in the end, they restructure the entire depth within a person. Many of our most beautiful qualities are not born of ease. Compassion often comes from having been abandoned. Tenderness is often created by those who have understood the feeling of being hurt. One who knows how to uplift others is often the one who went through days when no one uplifted them. Pain, if it does not make a person bitter, will usually make them kinder. For having walked through the darkness, they understand how great the value of a small lamp is to others. Some use suffering as a reason to close their hearts to the world, but there are also those who turn it into fuel for growth. Two people can go through the same loss, but one becomes cold, while the other becomes deeper. A wound does not decide who you become. The way you face it does. Suffering often forces one to face questions that a quiet life never makes them ask. When everything collapses, the false shell also begins to fall away. It is in the weakest times that one sees what is truly important, who is truly worth keeping, and what they themselves truly need to live. Pain is sometimes like a fire. It burns away the superficial things so that the core of the soul is revealed. A pearl is created from the wound of an oyster. The grain of sand hurts it, but instead of letting itself be destroyed, it covers that pain with layers of nacre until it creates the most beautiful thing within itself. Humans also have that magical ability. We cannot always choose what happens to us, but we can choose the way to turn pain into depth, into sympathy, into wisdom and tolerance. Wounds are not evidence of human weakness. They are the signs that you have lived, loved, lost, and still continue to walk. And very likely, the most beautiful part of you was not born from peaceful days, but from the very times the soul thought it could no longer recover.